Yes.
And I believe you are a note taker as well.
Oh, okay, great.
Hello, everyone. We'll go through the same process as soon as Ethan is ready.
Sharing the screen here. I've gotten this far off track. And then proposal B. Can everyone see this?
Yeah, I can see it, but you know.
Right.
So proposal B, questions.
Are we doing questions or just sort of, you know, the same positive, negative impact?
The same, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Positive, negative, yeah. We're starting there.
I mean, I think it's worth naming. This is like the reverse of the point Leah made with scenario A with Harrison Park. I mean, here you have potentially creating some transportation issues for students in the Harrison Park neighborhood that would be going to Woodstock, I believe, right? For K-5 Chinese DLI.
Yeah.
Ethan, is there a way we can make those post-its a little bit bigger so people can see it? Thank you.
Or actually, you know, I'm going to zoom in. If you need me to move the map around and you're not able to see it yourself, just let me know.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Well, I have a weird one, but so I'm thinking in terms of transportation for the kiddos, and how will that work? If Harrison Park has to do that, would there be a bus that would get the kids, or how? I'm just thinking.
I think, Michelle, they did talk about that there would be a bus, but my concern is not, I mean, my concern clearly is the students, but it's also the parents and the family members that don't drive accessibility to the building in the event of emergencies or school events, things.
Okay. I was just curious that I'm just thinking how we're getting them there. Thanks, Leah.
Oh, go ahead, Elizabeth, sorry.
I just have a question. I thought I saw at some point distance, some distance analysis for both, like the
Or did she freeze?
Yeah,
There
I
is-
can't hear.
I
It
see her
looks like
frozen.
Frozen.
she might have frozen. There is distance analysis on a scenario-wide level in the metrics here. There's also in the dashboard that same information for each of these, for both of these two scenarios.
If you leave this one up, Ethan, because I made a couple notes for myself about sort of the metrics, and a couple things I found interesting. Like even though in this one, I think you see, slightly. I think the middle school that is actually under 500 in this might actually be Tabor or something. I think I saw that it was one of the. It wasn't like both of the middle schools were really focusing on Harrison Park and Lane, and I think Lane in this one is well over is in really good shape. I think Harrison Park is a little bit closer to the line in the 2025 projection than we want, but I actually don't think that the drop off on that metric is coming from the two middle schools that were really centering here, which made me feel a little bit better about it. I did notice in this one though that Lent, and I think it's because of the model, right? Like this is the one where we're not sending Atkinson and Bridgers strands there. It's the neighborhood DLI program that the enrollment there could use probably a little bit of a boost potentially, or it's closer to that 270 line, I think, in the projection. So but you know, that's potentially solvable. And then my overall take, actually, I wish there were just some magic way to address the you know, the giant potential transportation inequity that we're talking about for the Harrison Park Chinese DLI. Because I think on the whole, if I could somehow, and you know, putting a caveat on the CSS stuff too, obviously, which we can get to, I actually thought this one was a relatively good starting point in terms of balancing both the metrics and having less of that stuff where it seems like really forced geographically just to make some numbers work, like a lot of the boundaries and things like that, at least in the parts of the area I'm more familiar with, seem to make more geographic sense. So with some big caveats, I thought this one actually did a pretty good job balancing the priorities here.
I'm gonna admit I don't know how to make the Zoom hand thing work. So my hand fell asleep, but I'm just gonna take a chance to talk since it's quiet at this moment. I found it really weird that they brought up crossing Foster as an issue in one of the groups regarding the last scenario, because our Leda kids have always crossed Foster, and Foster has a new number of lighted intersections and crosswalks for that purpose. But the point I wanted to make here is, I don't know how many of you have actually been to Arleta during school hours, and I think Kathleen can attest to this. We don't have space for more cars. We don't have space for people outside the neighborhood to transport their students to this school. Our streets are tiny. They're not one way. We're blocks off, well, a couple blocks off Foster, but down teeny arterial roads that like only one car can pass. So the idea of adding a number of other people commuting into the area is going to cause some transportation issues that are going to have to be addressed.
And you are correct, Sandra.
Can I ask a question? Sorry, my battery died before, but one of the concerns that was brought up about this, specifically about Tabor, was that it drops the enrollment numbers below 500.
Mhm.
And it was suggested that that was a temporary dip and that something else would be happening that would bring it back above 500. And if that's the case, is there a way to bridge the staffing impacts? So if we think that the enrollment drop is only temporary over the course of a couple of years, is there a way to mitigate a loss of staffing and the impacts to the school community?
I feel
Anybody
like
know-
those were issues that we also just had over the last phase. I mean, when converting Creston, Arleta, Marysville, and other schools to K-5s, we had exactly those same impacts. And so I would hope the district can answer that, because we're now in year 2 of that.
It ends up close too, right? It's like around 470 or something, I think, in the 2025 forecast. So you're right. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that would alleviate a lot of stress if this is something that's looked at, especially if it's a temporary dip. So.
I don't want to take anyone else's time, so if there's anyone else that wants to speak, please go ahead right now. I just wanted to reiterate some of the questions that I had posed in our Discord about this scenario. But I would happily step down if there's somebody else that has other questions. But essentially,
I had one more, but I also know
Go
I've
ahead.
talked a lot too, so I'll also go.
Well, go ahead, Andy. I have a few.
It was quick thing, and actually applies to both scenarios. I forgot to raise it, but I think Bridger's at like 95% utilization in both of these. I think that's without the portables, so maybe that's just an issue of whether the portables are long-term or not, but I think that's worth it. I think when you look at utilization, Bridger's way up there compared to the other A5s in both of these, and worth noting. And then maybe anticipate what you were going to say, Sandra. I think it's still worth noting, in addition to the other general questions about CSS, this specifically with CSS at Arleta has them going from K8, K5 back to K8 within the span of 2 years, which is, you know, that's a lot.
Yes, Andy, that's definitely one of the things we wanted to express. Our LEDA parents are feeling very much like the district punching bag at this moment. You know, we were a K8 or K5, we got turned into a K8, along with a lot of other schools. I'll acknowledge that. We had an incident, we had a principal that left at the last second. We had an unqualified person placed as our principal. That person you may have seen in news reports didn't call 911 when a child ingested crack. We went through hell and back to try to get rid of that principal. We had an interim principal. We finally got a principal who we may be losing now. We got switched from K8 to K5, which was really exciting and something that the community very, very much was strongly in favor of. And now we're being essentially told that we're going to revert to a K8. So there is really a lot of negative feedback surrounding that. And I will put out there that this does not affect my family. My student who's at Arleta this year will be at another school next year. But Arleta has been our home for many years, and just listening to what people have to say, that is what I'm conveying. I have personal feelings, but as someone who's not going to be as affected, I want to mirror what the community is telling me. So that is a huge concern for them. And then also a lot of questions surrounding this opportunity for neighborhood families to opt out. How is that going to affect the kids that are left in the 6th through 8th model? How is it equitable for the CSS families to be able to opt out of the middle school program? How will we be able to build a robust middle school program at a K8 when we failed before and now families can choose to leave?
I agree with that last question too. I think there's so much about just the technical, even just the technicalities of how this would work and how you get to a place where you can actually predict in a stable way what the enrollment would be while still giving kids access to the comprehensive middle school options the district has promised them. I'm not the expert here, but it's a lot. It's a pretty big circle to try to square, or whatever metaphor you want to use.
So I'm going to jump in because, and I guess it's a request, or, you know, I feel like I would really like more help understanding the impacts of the changes. And I think that what I really like, I have the numbers, I have the data, it's a lot. And I feel like I would like the people who were responsible for the educational outcomes at PPS, like I'm looking at you, Esther, because I feel like this is your job. And like just a kind of deeper analysis of what you think the pros and cons of the different scenarios are, in like recognizing the impacts, but also if we're looking at, okay, the outcomes are educational achievement. What's your analysis about how which of these scenarios does the best to get us to that place?
Well, this is intended to be a collaborative process, and I prefer not to share my opinion at this time because I do not want to sway anybody. So when we listen to what you all have to say and we go back and analyze the input that we have, then we'll be in a better position to say this is what the collective has decided. Me weighing in right now is going to sway minds, and I don't think that's appropriate.
No, and I wasn't expecting you to do it right now, but I'm just saying at some point as part of this process, I think
Yes.
that you have so much expertise that I need.
Yes, and I'm happy to do that.
Yeah.
At the right time.
Perfect. Thank you.
And then to what Elizabeth was saying is I have this written down, is whatever the outcome that we're going to propose to the communities from the past of going through this with different other neighborhoods, what are we expecting from the community, and how is PPS going to address and communicate like the sum, and there's going to be this dissatisfaction of the outcome, and how is PPS going to address that? And like I said, don't need to answer now, but I think that's important in terms of the uprising there may be into whatever proposal that's going to come out.
Well, and I think that's why it's worth, and maybe we won't be able to do it today, but you know, some of these questions, even about how the non-negotiables, because I, by the way, like I appreciate one of the big themes from the phase 1 feedback, and Esther, I'm sure you remember this, was the coalition asking you guys to come back to make some decisions for us, right? About the, and so I really appreciate that you guys took that feedback. I also, as like someone who, I don't think it's my job to like sell a particular proposal, but I want to be able to answer questions I'm getting from the community.
Yes.
I don't feel like even right now, I can draw a clear line between some of the decisions about where those non-negotiables came from and how they connect to sort of the equity goals that we've set here. I know we've seen the really high level bullets. I feel like we need one level more deeper understanding of what you guys were going for here, so that we can actually, because I think if you can't get people over that hurdle on those two things, it's really hard to get them to engage with the substance of the rest of the substance of the proposals. And there's a lot of these that as I've said, I think these do some good things, but I worry the whole thing's going to get derailed if we can't at least make a little bit more of a clearer case for some of the givens on CSS and the DLI stuff. So again, not something to answer now, but you know, I think something that needs to be prioritized.
Thank you.
And I'll be honest in terms of some of the boundary and schools that people thought they were going, and now they're going to another school. And I'll be honest in terms of a family with means and resources, those are the families that may explore like, hey, my kid's going to this school now. They're the ones with the resources that may have options to do otherwise. And that's a reality, right? And while they may even bring a lot of benefits to the next school that they're going to, but we have to sell it to them that, hey, this works for everyone, it will work for you, right?
I
not let them leave the system.
We had that problem at our LEDA for many years. When the kids would get up to the 6th grade level, they would either lottery out to another school or go to a private school. And so what was left behind were our families with the least amount of resources. And that was a huge concern.
Chris, I'm seeing your hand up. Oh, sorry, you're muted.
You're muted, Chris.
Okay, I just want to encourage us. And you're absolutely right. Parents with more means will pick up and move, and they always have. I guess I want to encourage us not to see the kids who don't have those resources as a deficit. And I don't want us to assume that those kids, higher SES kids that we might be gaining, are necessarily always going to bring the most wonderful things. I guess I'd like us not to see families and kids in that way. So I just want to put that out there, that those of us, but our children who are here now and who don't have those means to remove themselves, have wonderful caring families who have a lot to offer those kids who are whose families feel afraid to have their kids get to know those kids. Just a thought.
No, and I totally agree with that. But what I hear is like, hey, how come this school has a foundation and that school doesn't have a foundation? Right? And these are things that come up. So
I'm also hearing on the other end of the spectrum that our neighborhood families don't necessarily want focused families in their program, honestly. That's been presented to me quite a few times. Just a concern about cultural differences between the families that opt to go outside their neighborhood schools and the robust neighborhood community. That was a sentiment that has been presented to me by multiple people and teachers.
Sandra, can I just ask very quickly, did I capture that sentiment in this last note here?
I'm sorry, what?
Did I just want to make sure that I was accurately capturing that last sentiment in this note here that I'm sharing.
I think it's less about a concern about co-location as the supplantation. So they feel like that culture was going to come in and take over their culture, and just kind of a concern that people who didn't want to be there in the first place are now going to be at their school.
Minor last point, and I sort of, again, the reverse of something I raised with the last scenario. I do like that in this scenario, because of the way it's set up, every single student at Lent will still remain at Kellogg, even the Spanish DLA.
We have about 20 seconds left. So any burning input that we have to capture before we move into the general session?
Well, I just want to say that our group has been very good about listening to each other. I appreciate this.
Thank you. I agree as well.